How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 1 of What If Deku had a half air, half water Quirk. And now, before we begin, I would just like to tell you all I'm going to be responding to pretty much every single comment down in the comment section below for at least the next day or so. So please, if you have any what if suggestions or questions for me, comment them down below. And now, let's begin. Izuku, Shoto, come downstairs, it's time for breakfast. Ray Todoroki would say as both the two kids would rush downstairs, stomping their tiny feet on each and every single stair, as they would jump up into their chairs and would look on towards the plates that were now in front of them. They would grab both their knife and fork and would dig into their meal, as they were both incredibly hungry and excited. As the two would finish up basically as quickly as it was put in front of them, they would then be told that Endeavor, their father, Enji Todoroki, is going to be taking them to the Quirk doctor's office. Both of them would jump up and down in excitement, just being incredibly happy like any other child would their age. Izuku, Shoto, let's go, their father would say as both of them would get out of their chairs before walking with him towards their car. They would open up their front door, walking over towards their car, as they would both get in, being placed into their car seats as so they cannot get hurt if they were to get in some sort of car accident or something of the sort. They would both be sitting there as they would both look towards each other, with Izuku starting a conversation. So, Shoto, who do you think is going to have the stronger Quirk? Izuku would say with sparkles in his eyes, as Shoto would look towards him before laughing. It's obviously going to be me, Izuku, he'd say with a smile brightly shining on his face. Izuku would look at him or just laughing. Oh, sure, I'm obviously gonna have the better Quirk. I'm gonna become just like All Might, Izuku would say, shouting up into the air. Both of them weren't told that their father was Endeavor just yet, as Endeavor didn't want the secret to get out just in case if Izuku spread some just silly rumor that he was the son of the number 2 hero, he could get bullied or possibly kidnapped if the word would spread further into the villain's hands. It was basically just being paranoid, but you have to be paranoid in this situation. As Izuku would shout he'd be just like All Might, Endeavor would clench his hands on the steering wheel, kind of just angry how his own son didn't want to be like him, but rather his counterpart of the number 1 hero, All Might. They would pull into the doctor's office, parking as they would all get out of their seats, with Izuku and Shoto just arguing back and forth who would have the stronger Quirk. Please, Endeavor would say, stop arguing. Both of you are going to have incredibly strong Quirks. I just know it. His voice would change as they would then walk into the Quirk doctor's office. They would walk in as all three of them would sit down, as the Quirk doctor's office, or the just receptionist there, would see Endeavor sitting there waiting with his arms crossed. Doctor, Endeavor's here with presumably his 2 sons. Should we bring them in before everyone else? Yes, we wouldn't want the number 2 hero to be kept waiting, the doctor would say, hurrying his voice, as they would get both Shoto and Izuku into a room, as they would then perform a couple of x-rays. They would look at their bones, and before long, they would walk into the room again. Well, we have great news. Both Izuku and Shoto are going to have Quirks. However, we don't know exactly what these Quirks are going to be. It would say, as would nod their heads. Shoto with his half red and half white hair, while Izuku would have half blue, half white hair. However, their white hair would signify different things on them. So, with this, they would jump back into the car after walking out of the room, as Endeavor would just think to himself, this is great. Both of them are going to have Quirks. And presumably quite a similar Quirk at that. I have a feeling these two are going to become some of the strongest heroes ever. would say, as we end up seeing Izuku and Shoto being driven to school, as they would be in the front office waiting before getting a couple of passes, as they would return to school around halfway through the day at just about 11 a.m., just a couple minutes shy of lunchtime. So as they would walk into the classroom, they would give their teacher the late notes before sitting down. The teacher would smile on towards them before just motioning towards the front of the room. "So, class, can any of you tell me what 1 plus 2 is?" She would say, as all of the students would think to themselves. This is one of their first introductions of basic math, as all of them were just around the ages of 4 and 5. So they weren't just the brightest or sharpest tool in the shed, of course. So Izuku and Todoroki, or Izuku and Shoto, would be sitting there as the bell would ring for signifying lunch. They'd all rush to their cubbies, pulling out their lunch boxes, before rushing off towards the courtyard where they would all be seen eating. While there, all of the sudden, Izuku's just bottle of water would end up falling to the ground as water would spill onto the floor. However, before long, Izuku, seeing this, not wanting the rest of his water to be spilled, would end up using his quirk, stopping the water from spilling any further, as all of a sudden the wind would start blowing, causing the water bottle just to be kept in its place, with the wind blowing around it, keeping it right in one place. As the water would go right back into the bottle, Izuku would reach towards it, grabbing it before drinking it out of it. Todoroki and the rest of the class watching this would look amazed. Izuku was the first one out of all of them to unlock his quirk, and he was excited. He would say, "Whoa! Did I just unlock my quirk?" He would say with a very excited voice, as the entire class would look towards him, rushing around him in a circle. "Izuku, can you do that again?" They would ask, all just holding out their water bottles. Izuku would grab one before throwing it into the air as the wind would start blowing, circling around the water bottle, keeping it in one place, as the water would then flow right back into the water bottle, as the entire class would just look on in complete shock. "That's so cool!" many of the students would say, huddled around Izuku. Izuku would smile brightly with his shiny white teeth, just thanking everyone who'd compliment him. Todoroki would be sitting outside of the circle, just munching on a peanut butter sandwich. "I should have unlocked my quirk before him," he would say. This would spark a rivalry between the two brothers to constantly try to just outwork them and beat them at everything they tried to do. So with that, we end up seeing Izuku and Todoroki go home, as Todoroki would be sitting in his own room, while Shoto sitting in his own room, while Izuku would just be talking with his father about his cool new quirk. So with that, Todoroki would end up be sitting there, just clenching his fists in anger, as all of a sudden his door would open, his gaze would shoot as a fire would catch onto the doorknob. Endeavor would look at it for a second before smiling. "Ah, good job, Shoto. It appears you've unlocked your quirk as well. Well, I guess this means tomorrow we'll have to begin our training. This will, of course, help you to become the best heroes you can be," Endeavor would say, clenching his fist, as Todoroki would look towards him, just nodding his head. "Alright," he would say to himself. As we now end up seeing Izuku walk back home from school along with his brother, Todoroki. Once they would get back, Izuku and Todoroki would be standing just at the dinner table as Endeavor would walk down from the stairs. "Alright, you two, are you ready to begin your training?" He would say towards both of them, as both of them would nod their heads. "Alright, well, then follow me," he would say, as they would follow him into a training room where they would now end up seeing all these different types of weights. "Our first test is getting your stamina and just strength up. as you're not going to be able to use your quirk to its fullest extent if you can't lift a 5-pound weight. So, if you can't lift this 5-pound weight at your age, then we have a lot of work to do. I'll probably have to pull you out of school for a couple of weeks. But, thankfully, I don't see that happening. Both of you are incredibly strong, so I imagine you should be able to lift 5 pounds. It would say, handing each of them a 5-pound weight. Izuku would hold his hand clenched with it beneath his fingers, as he would end up curling it once or twice, as so would Todoroki, trying to outdo Izuku, however, wouldn't be able to lift it a third time, dropping it to the floor. With that drop, Izuku would end up looking over towards Todoroki before patting him on the back. "That's okay, Shoto. You'll get it next time," Izuku would say, smiling towards his brother. As the training would then end up beginning, as all of them would just start training together, becoming the strongest they absolutely can be. As they would be training, and we cut forward 2 years to when they are just around, I would say, 6 or 7 years of age. With all of them there, we see Izuku standing in the courtyard, looking across from Todoroki, as each of them would just be staring at each other, as both of them were now in a heated game of capture the flag, which in the place of a flag was a bouncy ball. So with that, Todoroki would be staring, looking on towards just a ball that was across from Izuku, and just a ball that was across from Todoroki, as these were the only 2 left in the game, as the rules had been shifted for this just courtyard game to just cause them have people just thrown into a jail or team jail that could only be gotten out if one person from the other team got thrown into theirs, somehow causing for only 2 people to be left, one on either side. Both Izuku and Todoroki would stare towards each other before rushing towards each other, both reaching out their hands, reaching towards the wall. However, before long, Izuku would look back, using his water quirk, causing for a puddle to be ridden beneath Todoroki. Causing his foot to slip, he would land head first right into just a pile of mud, with Izuku grabbing the ball, taking it back into his zone, giving Izuku's team the victory. Izuku would raise his hand in triumph as everyone would rush towards him. "Good job, Izuku," they would all say, just showering him with compliments. Todoroki would be sitting there, mud all over his pants and shirt, staring towards his brother. As Todoroki would get a handful of mud, he would throw it towards Izuku. However, Izuku would dodge right at the last second. "Good try, Todoroki." "Well, good try, Shoto," Izuku would say, looking towards his brother Shoto with a grin on his face. "Maybe you'll be able to hit me next time. But for now, keep training," Izuku would say with a cocky tone in his voice. "How dare he?" Todoroki would mutter under his breath, as Izuku would smile towards his brother. "Don't worry, Todoroki. Don't worry, Shoto. You just have to train a bit harder, you know? As I'm stronger than you, at least for now," Izuku would say with a cocky tone, basically just showing off to everyone else around him. Once everyone would clear out, either just going home or just going to a corner store, Izuku would be left swinging on the swing set, just wondering what to do. As all of this, he would end up looking on to a playground across from the playground he was on, as there was a young girl being pushed down by a blonde-headed bully. Izuku would start rushing over there before looking towards the person who was pushing her down. "Ugh, you stupid quirkless brat," the boy would say, staring down towards the young blonde-haired girl. The 2 blondeheads looked to be just in a fierce rage or competition between each other, and one, Izuku, assumed to be quirkless, while the other had a strong explosion quirk. The explosion-corked kid would look towards the young blonde girl, pushing her back down every time she tried to get up. "Can't you just stay down?" he would say, slamming an explosion into his fist. As Izuku would walk up to the boy, placing a hand on his shoulder. "That's enough," Izuku would say with a striking voice towards him. "Huh?" he would say, turning towards Izuku. "Who said that?" But before he could finish his sentence, he would be sucker punched right in the face by Izuku. As the boy would fall to the ground, Izuku would stand over him, glaring daggers into his soul. "What the hell was that for?" the boy would say, standing up, looking towards Izuku, pushing Izuku backwards. Izuku would stare on towards the kid, before twisting his hand around as a tiny tornado would form out of nowhere, pushing the young boy backwards, causing him to fall once again. Izuku would stand over, before using his water quirk, making tiny little water bullets, throwing them right at the boy using his air quirk, as they would each pelt the boy, creating tiny welts on his skin. Izuku would look on towards him, or telling him, "Get lost, kid," Izuku would say, even though both of them were both just basically the same age. Izuku would turn towards the young blonde-haired girl, before just reaching out a hand. "Hi, I'm Izuku. Are you okay?" Izuku would say as the girl would get up, taking his hand, brushing herself off. "Yeah, I'm okay, thanks. I'm Melissa," she would say before both of them would shake each other's hands. "Thanks for saving me, right there," she would say before wiping the tears out of her eyes. "Oh, it's nothing. I just try to save anyone who looks like they need help," the young innocent Izuku would say. The girl would smile towards him before thanking him. "Thanks again for saving me," she would say before running off. As Izuku would end up being seen just walking by, as he would walk back to his house, where Todoroki would already be hard at work, training his body, just punching outwards with flames and ice on his fists. As he would be punching outwards with Endeavor commanding him, he would greet Izuku, or he would end up just lining both of them up. "Alright, here's what I want to do. I want both of you to fight each other, alright? This will be your first sparring session between each other, just so I can measure the level of strength each of you are on." It would say as they would both stand across from each other, as Endeavor would raise his hand into the air before slashing it downwards. "Begin!" he would yell as both the children would rush towards each other, their fists flailing high. Both of them would rush towards to punch each other. However, Izuku would use his water beneath Todoroki's feet, causing Todoroki to slip. Izuku would widen his hand out before pushing Todoroki back with the strength of air, using the wind to force more momentum towards Izuku, with 30-mile winds slamming Todoroki down into the ground, as his body would just be forced jumping back, recoiling off the ground. Todoroki would lay motionless on the ground for a second, before Izuku would end up grabbing him by the head once again, just spamming water right into his eyes and mouth, choking Todoroki. Izuku would twist around, throwing Todoroki right into a wall, as Todoroki would end up falling down, slumping to the floor, as Endeavor would call the fight there, ending it early. "I've seen enough," he would say in a striking voice. "Izuku, go up to your room. I'll deal with Todoroki, alright?" he would say as Izuku would nod his head. Okay," Izuku would say, rushing back to his room, as we now end up seeing Todoroki just being in his bed with just a towel over his forehead, as Shoto had been knocked out by Izuku's barrage of punches, as Izuku really didn't give any mercy towards his brother. This sparring would go on for just years, until they would turn the age of 10, with Izuku dominating the sparring just completely outright. Izuku was a prodigy. He trained night and day, and he had just skills that he was born with all along. He didn't have to train, but yet he did, causing him to further become the prodigy and just thing that he was destined to become. While Todoroki wouldn't train as hard as Izuku and wasn't born with the strengths that Izuku was born with, meaning that Todoroki didn't stand much of a chance against Izuku. And because of this, Todoroki would lose 100 times to Izuku and would never win. He never would win against his brother. This troubled Todoroki so much, causing him to beat down on himself more than anyone else, more than even his father, telling himself, I can beat Izuku, I know it. But yet he never could. He never could beat Izuku. Because he didn't train like he could. He didn't train like he had to. He didn't train with urgency. He trained just with no heart, with no soul, causing him to get little strength in anything out of his training. It was just empty training that would go nowhere towards him. Sure, he would get a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, but it wouldn't be anything in the long run. It wouldn't be like Izuku, who was getting tons of strength and just speed from constantly pushing his body to the very limits every single day. All those compliments, sure, some went to his head, but he was still a good person, and he didn't let it go to his head enough to be like, oh, I'm better than everyone else. He knew there would always be someone ahead of him, someone that was always going to push him down, so he needed to train to get above them. While Todoroki had this person in front of him, above him, but he didn't train like he had to get above him. He didn't train with any urgency at all. So we now cut forward to Izuku and Todoroki lining up for their 101st sparring fight. It was on both of their birthdays, as they would each stand across from each other. Izuku would wish his brother good luck, as Todoroki would stand there glaring at Izuku. As the match would begin, Izuku and Todoroki would rush towards each other. However, Todoroki would have flames around his left fist. As he would punch Izuku would cool the burn with his water before jumping backwards, splashing water on towards Todoroki, causing him to get wet. This would make his fire less just useful and less powerful. As Todoroki would slam his foot onto the ground, ice would just appear out of nowhere, jacketing up towards Izuku. As this jagged ice would just jump towards Izuku, Izuku would use his wind, creating a spear out of air, throwing it towards the ice. It would shatter the ice into millions of little pieces, causing for Todoroki to rush towards Izuku, punching him right in the face before grabbing him and slamming him onto the floor. Izuku would jump up quickly, punching Todoroki, as both of them would then start trading blow for blow, as each of them would start pushing each other back a couple inches before being pushed back themselves a couple inches. The fight looked to be in a stalemate. There was no clear winner and there was no clear loser, as it was basically completely even. As both of them would be pushing each other back, all of a sudden, just immense burning smell would erupt, filling their nostrils. Both of them would sniff, stopping the fight. As Endeavor would do this, smoke would fill the room. What the... He would say to himself, rushing downstairs, as there stood just their brother, Toya Todoroki. As their brother would stand there, right there, as both of them would look on in shock. He had ran away from their home 3 years ago, and was just labeled as missing, and they never found him. But now here he was with scars riddled all over his body and what looked to be like stitch marks lining his arms and legs. As he would be standing there looking completely different, he would smile on towards his brothers. Good afternoon, Izuku and Shoto. He he would say with a smile written on his face. As he would say this, both Izuku and Todoroki would collapse backwards, breathing heavily, as their fights had just been so much on their little bodies that they were just so damn tired. They could barely move. They had been trained day in and day out for so long, and they just were just so tired and filled with fatigue. As this, Toya would smile, walking towards Endeavor, as Endeavor, still in shock, would have a hole punched right through his body. That felt so good to do, Toya would say, reaching out his hand as blue flames would erupt out of them, just completely erupting on to Endeavor, completely consuming Endeavor's face whole, as Endeavor's eyes would explode outward as blue flames would flow out Endeavor's eye sockets and mouth. He would be shaking violently before slumping to the ground, completely just not moving, as his body would limp, just would go completely limp. Both Izuku and Todoroki would stare towards this in shock, as Toya would walk towards both of them. I know both of you love to see that, as I had to go through the same training you all had to do, day in and day out, a constant torture trying to become better than everyone else. But now, I can promise a better life. All you have to do is come with me, and I'll make your life just as good as mine. All the food you could ever want, all the money you could ever dream of, and never having to train every hour of the day. So, who's with me? I would say, with an evil expression on his face, he would reach out his hand, looking both towards Todoroki and Izuku. I can promise a better life than this. I can. Of course, you'll have to sacrifice your dreams of becoming a hero. But But do you really want to become a hero? Or was that just Endeavor's goal for you? Was that just our father's goal for both of you? He would say, reaching out his hand one more time, as both Izuku and Todoroki would stand just completely still, not quite sure what to think. Both of them motionless, they would look towards him, shaking their heads, kind of just confused, as all of a sudden Todoroki would stand up, grabbing his brother's hand. He would look towards Izuku in the corner of his eye, before Toya would look back towards Izuku one last time, before walking away. With a purple portal opening up, they would end up walking right through it, disappearing. As Izuku would fall backwards, he would stare up towards the sky, not sure really what to think. Was this all just a dream? Or was it reality? He was so confused, it didn't really make much sense to the young boy. So as Izuku would sit there just kind of thinking to himself, all of a sudden his eyes would start to blur as wood would start toppling down towards Izuku as his entire house would just start being devastated by this immense blue deep fire, as all of a sudden a timber would fall down, going right towards Izuku. However, he would be surrounded into a pool of water, as this bubble would start spinning rapidly, deflecting anything that would just go landing, trying to at least land on Izuku. As Izuku would be laying there, just going completely unconscious with his Quirk basically protecting him, as Izuku would end up waking up with the water splashing down, with just the crackling of wood and ember still filling the air. As Izuku would stand up, burning his hand onto the recently charred wood. He would look around, completely in shock. Why? Izuku would say to himself, staring on towards his house. It was completely decimated. Nothing left. As Zuko would end up walking over, seeing his mother's remains, just his mother's body lying right in the middle of the floor. And that is where part 1 of What If Deku Had a Half Air, Half Water Quirk comes to an end. I hope you all did enjoy it, and if you did, please consider subscribing, as it really does help this channel out, and you can even be notified when the other parts of this series do end up coming out. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.